There was a shooting incident this morning at the home of the well-known Paralympic athlete Oscar Pistorius. At this stage we can confirm that a young woman, a 30-year-old woman, did die on the scene of gunshot wounds. A 26-year-old man has been arrested and has been charged with murder.
In the dock, the world's most famous Paralympic athlete, Oscar Pistorius. The victim, his girlfriend Reeva Steenkamp, a model about to hit the big time, the latest star of network television.
You fall in love with being in love with love. It's just one love everywhere.
But was it, as the state alleges, premeditated murder? Or was it, as Oscar Pistorius claims, an innocent but dreadful mistake?
All he said to me was, there's been a terrible accident. Reeva's been shot. I've shot Reeva.
I'm Rick Edwards and I'm flying 6,000 miles from London to South Africa to find out more about the case that stunned the world.
This was by far one of her favourite dresses.
For the last 2 weeks, I've spoken to people close to both Oscar and Reeva.
She was just the most incredible, bubbly person.
Enough will never, ever be enough for him, in the sense that he will always drive himself to achieve better.
With computer graphics, we recreate Pistorius' house, and the defence forensic pathologist gives his first TV interview.
She was shot in the region of her right hip. She was shot in the right arm, and she was shot in the head.
Is there a darker side to the Blade Runner?
Yes, he threatened me. Yes, he was aggro, and yes, he was very aggressive on the phone, and yes, he did threaten to break my legs.
Over the years, I think as more as fame and success and money came into his life, I saw a very different Oscar.
Oscar Pistorius spent Valentine's night in a cell in this police station. I've got a copy of his charge sheet here. The accused did unlawfully and intentionally kill Reeva Steenkamp. I've come to South Africa to find out how and why this tragic event unfolded. I want to find out what really happened. Last September, I was at the Olympic Stadium in London presenting coverage of the Paralympics. Millions of viewers across the globe watched as Oscar Pistorius won 2 gold medals, a silver medal, and set 3 world records along the way. He was the poster boy for the Paralympics. Later, things have changed so dramatically. The sporting hero is now a murder suspect. Travelling across South Africa, it's hard to understand how a story of modern-day celebrity romance could end in such a way. But it was here, in the pitch-dark early morning of St. Valentine's Day, that this secure, quiet suburban estate was woken by shouts, screams and sobs coming from the house of one of South Africa's most famous sons. Oscar Pistorius has shot his new girlfriend, hitting her at least 3 times. He says it's an accident. He's mistaken her for a burglar. She's still alive. Just. At 3:19, he telephones a neighbour for help. At 3:20, he calls the hospital. He is crying and sobbing. He carries her downstairs to the ground floor, but it's too late.
All indications are that she died en route to the bottom where they laid her body downstairs. She died at or about that point.
At 3:30, CCTV cameras record the police and ambulance arriving. At 3:55, Oscar Pistorius calls a friend, Justin Devaris, who'd introduced him to Reeva. We've approached Justin Devaris several times, and on each occasion he's declined to take part in our programme. However, we have obtained a recording of the only interview that he has given with a reporter working for the Sunday People.
All he said to me was, there's been a terrible accident. Reeva's been shot. I've shot Reeva. And then the neighbour picked up the phone. The neighbour was already in the house, a young lady, and she said said to me, no, it's true, Reeva has been shot. It's not good. You must, can you come here?
He was 40 minutes away in Johannesburg and set off immediately to Pistorius' home near Pretoria.
By the time I got there, there was a whole lot of police there. The ambulance had already come and gone. It was already a crime scene. I wasn't allowed in the house. The door was open. I could see her lying at the bottom of the stairs, covered in towels. Oscar was being detained in the garage. He was totally incoherent. He just kept saying, I killed my baby. He called her my baba, my baby. God take me away. And he was sobbing the whole time.
Good morning, I'm Lynn O'Connor. We continue with our breaking news coverage of a shooting in Pretoria. Olympic and Paralympic star Oscar Pistorius has been taken into custody after he allegedly shot and killed a woman believed to be his girlfriend.
At home in Johannesburg, Reeva Steenkamp's housemate Gina Myers receives a phone call.
I started screaming, "Where's Reeva? Where is she? Where is she?" I was screaming because I knew, and she said, "Gee, I need you to sit down, there's been an accident." And I just carried on saying, "Where is she?" And then I started getting emotional, and then she said, "Gee, I'm sorry, there's been an accident." And she told me she was gone. I started screaming, and my dad came running, and my sister was running, and my mom came running, and I couldn't talk on the phone. I couldn't function. I know that I never ever want to relive anything like that again, because I would never wish that on my worst enemy. It was one of the worst phone calls I've ever received in my whole life.
Coverage of this tragic event has swamped the South African media. The level of interest, both national and international, in the events of that night and its aftermath is almost unprecedented. It's arguably the biggest story to come out of South Africa since the release of Nelson Mandela more than 20 years ago.
I was completely shocked by what happened, and I think that shock began to set in even more throughout the day as a fuller picture began to emerge, because the initial reports that we were hearing that were coming out were about the fact that Oscar Pistorius had shot his girlfriend thinking that she was an intruder. And then the police came out and gave an impromptu press conference outside his home.
We have also taken cognizance of the media reports during the course of the morning of an alleged break-in, or that the young lady was allegedly mistaken to be a burglar. Obviously, our forensic investigation is still ongoing. We're not sure where this report came from. It definitely didn't come from the South African Police Service.
And all of a sudden, the picture changed, and we began to think, well, maybe that's not the version. Maybe there's more to this. Maybe this isn't a tragedy. Perhaps there was intent. Perhaps there was a crime that was committed here.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Maurice Levin. Welcome to the second installment of what I hope will become an enduring platform for topical, edgy speakers to come to Cape Town. And let me kick off by acknowledging the support of Ludi and Anne Cross. They own this theatre. This is a much-loved Cape Town landmark. It was actually threatened with closure, and Cape Town people got very vocal in their support for its continuation. They advertise my events in their in their cinema correspondence, and I really thank Ludi and Anne for the support. Thank you to Jenna at the back there for some stupendous organisational skills for this evening. Many people have emailed me since I began marketing tonight's talk, accusing me of prejudice in the wording of the invitation and stating that a journalist talking about a trial in progress is strictly illegal. So I was tempted to ask Barry if he could bring Mikey Schultz down from Joburg just to guard the door there, because there has been a little bit of hate mail. But let me just explain to you. A few years ago, it would have been impossible to get a guy like Barry to speak on a trial. Why? Because the trial is in progress, and there's a rule called sub judice, which has now fallen away. So I've obviously had to consult quite a few attorneys and heads of department at universities like Anton Harbour in Johannesburg and Guy Berger in Grahamstown, and they've said that I've got to refer to a court of appeal, a decision in 2007, and I have to read it because it's quite tough. The right to a fair trial now had to be weighed against the right to freedom of expression. So it's purely and 100% okay to have Barry here this evening. On to Barry. His Twitter following precedes him. Just while that video was going, I had a look at his Twitter account, and it's north of 132,000. That is a pretty impressive following for a South African journalist who is followed by all manner of international media. He gets interview requests on a daily basis. You can just imagine how his time is going to be eroded come March 2014 when the trial resumes. A cursory glance at Barry's tweets over the past month reveal a dizzying array of news topics that he's covered. The Shanoa Henning murder hit in Pretoria, there's just been a judgment on that. Radovan Kretscher and the Bedford View hits, now numbering 10 over the last 5 years. Zuma's in Kandla. I must just tell you that Zuma's in Kandla is a lot more luxurious than the hotel that I organised for you this evening. The imminent e-tolling of Johannesburg highways, the collapse of a shopping mall in Tongaat, I'm sure you guys followed that, the travails of our public protector Thuli Madonsela, and ongoing, and perhaps most critical, is the health of our ailing former President Nelson Mandela. Barry matriculated from Witbank High School in 1997. He followed an IT career path, but was naturally drawn to the news gathering process, commentating on news and politics through blogging. He wrote for the Pretoria News for 5 years before joining Eyewitness News, which is part of the Prime media stable. Barry is married with 2 daughters. He's just celebrated his 6-year anniversary last Sunday. Congratulations. And if you scan his tweets, this is what I find quite interesting. If you scan his tweets, you see quite a lot of reference to good quality sound equipment and all sorts of musical genres like bounce and techno and trance, and of course I share those interests, so sometimes I actually notice them before his news updates. But he's been given the nickname of DJ Batman in the Prime Media offices of Johannesburg. He makes a cracker bolognese. He asserts that the meat must become the sauce, not merely be a part of it. I'm not sure what that means, but I think I know what you mean. And let me tell you something, this guy slugs craft beer more voraciously than a Johannesburg cop takes bribes. So, I'd just like to welcome Barry Bateman, and I thank each and every one of you for your support this evening. This is a great turnout, and I implore you to ask questions, and I implore you to interact with him, and just have a great evening. Cheers.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me. Bit out of my depth. I'm used to speaking daily to about 700,000 people, but in 2-minute little blocks. I've now got an intimate audience, and I have to keep you entertained for about an hour. I just hope I can put it through. I'm sure I should be able to do it. Clearly the topic, and this has been since the 14th of February this year, from a journalistic perspective, one of the biggest or the most divisive topics in South African media history, I suppose. It's one of those discussions that has divided public opinion in a court case like no other. You're either in the Pistorius camp, I'm sure you've all heard of them before, who are avidly the big supporters of Oscar Pistorius, or you're on the side of the Reeva family and you see this man as a cold-blooded murderer. And this is a narrative that we've established, and I see it daily on my Twitter feed. You just got to say something that is seen as being one way or the other, and you will get this reaction. And I suppose we've got to look at what Oscar meant to South Africa to understand why it has become such a divisive subject. And we've got to look at a history of a young man and what he represents, and this narrative of somebody who has overcome great obstacles. Somebody who was born with a congenital birth defect, who, I think before his first birthday, had his legs amputated below the knee. And that's the way he lived his life. He was born in Pretoria, he grew up, he was an avid sports youngster from a young age. He even played rugby at Pretoria Boys High School. And went on into athletics and ultimately to become this hero of South African sport. I think it was probably about a decade ago when he started entering the headlines or getting into the headlines, and somebody looked at it and, you know, people could identify this guy. And of course that triumph. And this culminated, and it went all the way through until, I think it was 2013, 2011, I think it was his first able-bodied competitive race. He went into that global recognition, and this pushed on through, and we had the highlight of his career. 2012 was the year he earned his most in endorsements. I think we look at about 5 million rand that he took home in 2012 alone. And this we're going through the London Olympics and going on through to the, of course, the Paralympics. We remember that. And he became a household name. Everyone loved Oscar. You know, we had him on the radio stations, we watched him on the television. And enter Reeva Steenkamp. In 2012, we first get sight of her on Oscar's arm at an award ceremony late in 2012. Immediately, she herself was, and we'll get into that in a second, she herself was establishing herself as a bit of fame. She was, you know, becoming quite popular, beautiful young woman. But here came the celebrity couple. I mean, the tabloid press absolutely lapped this up. You've got this young, rich man, he's a powerful athlete, he's famous, and on his arm is this beautiful young woman. She herself has got the celebrity status. It just makes for red carpet fodder. I mean, who could not lap this up? And there was this love story, and we had this fantastic couple. And there was South Africa's darling couple. And then came Valentine's Day. And I think that's where we all really took notice, whether you were into the celebrity press, whether you were into the sports news of Oscar, or just, you know, regular South African that, you know, maybe would keep an eye on these two people on the odd occasion. You might see them, you might be interested, you might not. Not just South Africa, the world. And this became one of the biggest stories, or at the time it was the biggest story in the world. And where I think I'll start with this is I'll start you with my personal account on the 14th of February. And then we'll go through, I'll go through chronologically. And we'll get through to we'll deal with the issues of the court case, the bail application, and then ultimately we'll end up where we are now. I woke up on the 14th of February and I actually called, you heard Lynn O'Connor on there, she was breaking that news. She was Eyewitness News, my news editor that morning, she was reading. And I called Lynn, I said, listen, and I really wasn't feeling too hot that morning. I said, listen, can I take the day? And she was kind enough, oh, not a problem. This was quite early in the morning. And it wasn't 20 minutes after that, I got a call from a contact of mine in Bronkhorstspruit. Now, if you know Pretoria, or the way the police have worked their way now, you don't deal with police stations specifically, you deal with clusters. So there'll be 5 police stations to a cluster. So the cluster guy called me, but a contact of mine. He said, aren't you in Pretoria East? I said, what's going on in Pretoria East? He said, no, there's been a shooting at Oscar's house. I said, no, shit, I haven't heard anything like this. He said, what can you tell me? Shooting dead or shooting injured? I mean, how serious is it? He says, no, he's not too sure. He just knows something is happening there. Right, I get on the phone. So before I'm going to call the desk and make a big change for the whole day, because this is getting quite serious now, I get hold of the Boschkop police station. And you saw the sign on that. That's the area, the precinct under which his luxury estate falls. And I spoke to his captain and I said, Barry Bateman, Eyewitness News, you know, very serious. I understand there's been a shooting at Oscar Pistorius' house. Can you confirm this? She's very nervous. Clearly this was getting very big very quickly. She said, yes, there has been an incident. I said, right, is it shooting dead or is it shooting injured? And this is perhaps one of the most ridiculous answers I've ever heard from a police officer. She says, we're still investigating that. And immediately became clear we've got a problem on our hands here. I called Lynn O'Connor. I said, listen, this is what's just happened. Obviously, we didn't want to break the news just then either, because given the nature of it and who the person is, you want to be dead sure of what you're dealing with. So I said, put me through to Cindy Paluta, who's our sports editor, and she would have a number for Oscar's coach. And she immediately put me through to Cindy Paluta, and I said, listen, Cindy, we think Oscar's shot somebody dead at his house. Oh my fuck, I think was the exact words that she said like that. And she gave me this number, and I immediately, and by that time, and you must remember as well, this is morning, I've got a little girl I've got to get ready for school, so it's getting a little bit scrambled. That's my duty in the household. I've got to take my little girl to school.
So it's a matter of getting on the phone, and we're speaking to the coach, and I say to him, we understand there's this incident in Oscar's house, what's going on? And he himself didn't even know that. I said, listen, I'm aware of something, but we don't know ourselves. But the call was already given to me, get out there. Meantime, the desks in Joburg are on the phone. Race out, drop my kid off, race across town. And it was just 5 minutes before I got to Oscar's house outside in the east of Pretoria. And it was Beelt who actually broke the story, and they broke it on Twitter. And we'll get into social media later in this chat. And they broke it on Twitter. Oscar Pistorius shoots dead his girlfriend, believed to be a burglar. And that's it, we had it. And I stopped outside his house 5 minutes later. We dropped it on Twitter. I think it was within minutes, Lynn O'Connor was crossing live to me. So we had it, I'll give Beelt a little bit of credit there, but we had it first on the airwaves. So, it's quite a huge story. I mean, immediately, and I'm not lying when I say the lines because we broke it on the air, it became public knowledge. The lines at Eyewitness News went nuts. CNN, Sky, BBC, all your internationals, everyone calling in, what is going on? This is how quickly it exploded into a global story. And it was within an hour, maybe an hour and a half, that all the international media, we had our local guys who got there to the scene first, but that the international media started arriving, and you could see that the massive interest. And at this stage, it was still coming in drips of drabs. What had happened, We weren't quite sure, and I'll go into you heard that quote from the police officer saying that the police didn't tell anybody where that whole intruder story came from, because that's how we got it initially, that he had mistaken a person, we didn't know it was his girlfriend at the time, for an intruder, and he had accidentally shot her dead, and that's where we were reporting it. The reason the police came out and said, you didn't get it from us, and that whole denial of that particular story of the way it happened, they were so shit scared, given the high-profile nature of this year, that one of their own had actually leaked something to the media. That was their concern. But it was obviously the Steenkamp story. That's the version he gave from the very beginning, that it was somebody he had mistaken for an intruder. And I think we spent about 5 hours outside Oscar's house and waiting there, and we eventually saw the mortuary van leave. And he was taken to the Bushcott police station. He was processed there. In the meantime, the media was already gathering at the courthouse. We anticipated a bail application to be launched that day. So while everyone was following Oscar going to Bushcott police station, from there he was taken to the Mamelodi day clinic, where his blood samples were taken, urine samples were taken, I think swabs were taken of his hands, given the nature of this particular crime. So a full workup for what would eventually be the murder case. That didn't happen, and Oscar Pistorius spent, and I think we saw footage up there of him being led to the Bushcott with his hoodie on. He spent his first night in jail at the Bushcott police station. Friday morning was going to be his first appearance. That was a Thursday. Friday morning was going to be our first glimpse of Oscar Pistorius in a courtroom, and this was going to be huge. I mean, I spend at least 2 out of 5 days a week at the Pretoria Magistrates Court. I mean, that's my court. I walk in and out of this thing every day. I've never had to elbow somebody in the head to get into a courtroom before. I have never seen it like this in my life, and already by that Friday morning, we had this international interest and the fight to get into a courtroom to get a glimpse of Oscar. After 3 hours, we managed to get in, and the star was going to make his first court appearance. And if you can imagine Oscar Pistorius as you remember him prior to the 14th of February, you'd probably get a glimpse of somebody on the athletics track. Usually triumphant, hands in the air, maybe a South African flag over his shoulders. That is the image that was, you thought of Oscar like that. Or if you were from the celebrity side with his girlfriend, standing in a most fancy tailored suit. In stark contrast to that, and I think this is when it really hit home, was what you were dealing with for the media in particular. When you're standing in a courtroom and you see Oscar come in, and he's the most defeated individual I think I've ever seen. Absolute trauma on his face. I mean, what this says about his guilt or not, that can't be drawn. But seriously, somebody who has been traumatized what had happened 2 nights before that. And it was during the proceedings, and from time to time he would break down. And like I said, you think of that triumphant man, this great, glorious hero on the athletics track, to somebody who sat in a dock with his head down on his chest, shaking the way he was whimpering, and the tears streaming down his face. So, and I think that's also why this is such an emotional case. And it comes back to this whole story and this narrative of the fall from grace. Oscar Pistorius, this great hero, to this pathetic accused standing in the dock. Ultimately, the bail application couldn't take place on the Friday. His lawyers asked that we postpone until the Tuesday. They needed time to consult. He was going to be held in the Brooklyn police station over the weekend. And that's when the media really got going, because now you start tapping your contacts. And the first big expose that we received was on the Sunday. And I don't know if anybody remembers the City Press expose that Sunday and the bloody cricket bat. And if you recall that. I've never seen a shotgun approach as to what has happened in a crime before like this one, because they gave us 3 different scenarios which could have happened with that cricket bat. Now, I'll get into where it actually comes in, but we had this first scenario was that he either bludgeoned Reeva to death with the cricket bat. The other one was that he broke down the door with it, and I forget the third, but that was the big expose on how he had killed his girlfriend. And of course, in the UK, because by now the tabloids had started operating, it was quite something. The Sun, let me skip one more day. On the Monday, it was the Sun in the UK, the tabloid. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. Steroids. That was the big one. Steroids found in Oscar's house. And the story that was being told there, and the narrative was roid rage. I don't know if you've heard the term. It's people who use steroids that become particularly aggressive. And this was what apparently set off, and of course, throw in the Hooghart SMS, famous rugby player. Sorry, I forget his first name. There we go. Francois Hooghart. Throw in that, because there was also that rumor going around of Francois Hooghart, the previous love interest, who had sent the SMS that set him off, of course, with the steroids, and he went and he killed his girlfriend. That was how the press was handling the story in this void of information at the time. And we came Tuesday morning. By that time, the street, it's Pretoria Street in front of the Pretoria Magistrates Court, had become a spaghetti web of cables which lined the floor and satellite vans down the side of the street and in the front, just to give you an idea of already the weekend push that came from the international media to mobilize into South Africa. It was quite something. The only time I saw it thereafter was when Mandela got sick. And there was again that fight to get into court. You've got to secure your position. Pardon me, I'm just getting lost here a little bit, if you don't mind. Let me take you through the legal teams. And I've actually spent the last couple of days with the prosecution team in this matter. We've got Gerrie Nel, everyone probably knows Gerrie Nel, and his sidekick, Advocate Andrea Johnson. This is the team that put away our wonderful former police commissioner, Jackie Salibi. They come from the Scorpions, and this week they managed to secure a fantastic conviction with the Chanel Henning murder case. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. There was a hit in Pretoria, but a really crack team was put together, and Gerrie Nel and Andrea Johnson, they led this prosecution, and they managed to get these guys on. And it wasn't just murder, it was conspiracy to murder, so slightly more technical in terms of the legal argument. But Gerrie Nel and Andrea Johnson and their team, they'll be heading up the prosecution in this. On the defense side, you have Advocate Barry Rue, Pretoria-based advocate. He's been practicing for more than 30 years, seasoned in the both Johannesburg and Pretoria. And by his side, we've got 2 advocates representing Oscar. It's Kenny Aldridge. Aldridge is familiar with the Pistorius family. Aldridge also represented Carl Pistorius in his, the accident was a culpable homicide case, which was eventually thrown out. It was a dodgy case. He should never have been charged in the first place, but he's got a history with the family in representing them. Going into this year, these are the teams that'll be pitted, and we're going in next year into the trial. These are the teams that'll be battling it out against each other. Now, in the courtroom, you can imagine, and the media had a specific place where we were going to put, and the family had their support. And this is where we got a glimpse of the real. I mean, there was family there the previous on the Friday, but on this Tuesday morning, you had a greater number of family. You had Uncle Arnold, as he's become known, who has become the father to Oscar Pistorius. Oscar doesn't get along well with his biological father, Henke Pistorius, and it dates back to trouble. His mother died when he was a teenager, so there's a history there where Uncle Arnold took him under his wing and pretty much raised him together with Carl and Amy. Now, this whole family was there. We had his aunts, uncles, the sons-in-laws. And it was when Oscar walked in and the proceedings got underway. You could see the support, I suppose, that he was getting from his family. I mean, it was immediately the glance over to his relatives who were waiting for him. But, sorry, I've lost my train of thought there. Can I have a drink of water? Like I said, I usually do it in 2-minute bursts with John Matham down here in Cape Town. So pushing on for this long. Cheers. I think where we're going to jump to, let's go straight into being a bail application. You'd have the applicant, Oscar Pistorius. He wants to lodge his bail. We'll go through. This is where we got a first idea of what took place in the house that early morning on Valentine's Day. And it was Barry Rue who had Oscar's affidavit, which he read into the record. 13th of February, Oscar and Reeva, they had plans to go out. I think Reeva wanted to go out, but she decided against it. She stayed in, and they had a relaxing evening. Oscar was lying on his bed. He had his prosthesis off. He was taking it easy. It was a warm summer evening in Pretoria. Reeva was relaxing. She was busy doing her yoga exercises before bed. They eventually turned in somewhere between 9 or 10 o'clock, nothing unusual. Oscar says he woke up sometime at about 2:30, 3-ish in the morning, realizing that he had left his sliding door open and he had left the fan outside on the balcony. And he says he got up to go and collect this fan, bring it inside, and close the sliding door and the curtains. It was then that he inserted into the affidavit that, it was just after that, but it's relevant to bring it up now, that he sleeps with his 9mm pistol next to his bed. He says he's cognizant of the crime in South Africa. He says he's received death threats and he's concerned about it. This is why he sleeps with his firearm right next to his bed. He grabbed the fan, he brought it inside, he closed the curtain, and that's when he heard a noise coming from inside the bathroom. Immediately startled, he didn't quite know what it was. He ran round to the side of his bed. Remember, this is somebody who's fearful of crime. He didn't know who it was. He also makes the point, he was on his stumps at the time. When he's without his prosthesis, he feels vulnerable. He felt a cold fear coming over him. He grabbed his firearm. He recalls remarking to Reeva at the time, saying something to her. But he grabbed it and he went down the passage to where the bathroom is. Now, if you're standing in the main bedroom and the bed is over here, to get down to the bathroom is a passage with, it's almost like a walk-in wardrobe with the wardrobes on either side. And at the end is a short right-hand turn, and you'd go into the bathroom, and it's a short cubicle. If you would come round, and I'm turning into the bathroom now, you'll have a wall over here. You'd have a bath over here. To my right would be the basins, and over there would be the cubicle. He says he came in and he looked into this toilet cubicle, and he could hear the noises coming from inside the toilet cubicle. Again, not knowing what it was, who it was, and fearing not only for his own life, but that for his girlfriend, Reeva. He fired 4 shots through the door. And that's when he turned around and he ran back. And it was in that time, only when he went back to the bed where he was going to put on his prosthesis, did he realize that Reeva is not in the bed. And this is when it dawned on him that, well, it might be Reeva that was in fact in the bathroom, in the toilet cubicle. That's when he put on his prosthesis. He went back into the bathroom. Now he switches on the lights. Everything's lit up. The door's locked. He can't open it. That's when he grabs the cricket bat. And it's a panel door. If you look at it, there'll be 2 panels like that. He managed to knock down the top panel, puts his arm in, unlocks the door, opens it, and there he finds his girlfriend. Gunshot wound to the right above the ear. She's shot in the elbow, and I think it was the abdomen. But she's unresponsive. He says he grabs her. This is where the blood gets on the cricket bat. This is the whole thing where he grabs her body. He takes her downstairs. And as you heard Reggie Perimal there, that's the private forensic investigator which was hired by his legal team. That's where she eventually died. Investigators will ultimately find her there covered in the towels. And that's the story that we got from Oscar Pistorius. Jump across, and we look at what the state's going to say. And this is where Mr. Hilton Botha enters. And I'm sure you've heard of Detective Hilton Botha from Boschkop Police Station. And I'll just go through the narrative, and then we'll go to where he made some huge concessions. What the state's going to say is, and they've got they claim they have the witnesses to support this, is that there was an altercation that evening. That not everything was hunky-dory, and it was this lovely evening of a couple that went to bed. They're going to say that there was an altercation between Oscar and his girlfriend. They've got neighbors who heard the screaming. Reeva went into that bathroom and she locked herself in there to protect herself. And in a fit of rage, Oscar Pistorius fired those bullets through that door, ultimately killing his girlfriend. Now, Warrant Officer Hilton Botha, now, if anybody's been, I'm curious, is anybody here a lawyer? One lawyer. Am I doing all right? Go on, Kelly.
She works for CNN.
Oh.
I'm a criminal law lecturer at the University of Cape Town, and I'm a legal analyst for CNN.
Cool, thank you, thank you. Anybody who's been to court and you've spent some time in court, you watch somebody who's being led through evidence. So in this case, it was Gerrie Nel, the state, leading his witness through the evidence. I tell you, it sounds perfect. It is fantastic. You know, it's untested at that stage, and so it's fantastic to listen to. And Hilton Botha went through this whole series of information which supported that, you know, the way, and there was the whole issue about the angle of the shots. According to his eye, you know, this is an experienced detective, he noticed, he could see that the angle of the bullets, the way it went through, would prove that Oscar was in fact on his prosthesis, because that's the argument that the state was putting at the time, that he didn't wake up and be without them, and it was this spur of the moment thing. He was in fact walking around on his legs. And then the big claim came about the testosterone, or not testosterone, the steroids. I mean, and I almost fell over backwards as well over this story. I mean, because this then supported the whole roid rage narrative, which has been pushed by the tabloids. We're like, gee, they actually found steroids, you know, and this is a huge story. Until it became Barry Roo's opportunity to cross-examine poor Hilton Botha. And the state story at that, he became an unreliable witness. I mean, for one, the steroids that he testified about turned out to be, it's a herbal remedy called testis compositum, if I'm not mistaken. It's entirely legal. It's a non-steroid. It's I suppose as good as homeopathy. But it's the point is, he went and set it as evidence and untested. And so it started punching holes through the state's case, and ultimately emerged, and I don't think it'll affect the state's case in the end, but it emerged that the police were walking around on the scene, Hilton Botha in particular, without the correct shoes on to secure the scene. Sorry, again, I've lost my train of thought again. You're right there, Maurice.
Brew, I just want to tell you that you can't see what you're doing. You're doing a magnificent job. It is...
That'll get me talking. One thing that came out in the watching the bail application, and And I'm sure you might have pondered this as well when you might have read about it. There was this whole debate between the legal teams whether this is a Schedule 5 or a Schedule 6 offence. I'm not sure if you heard that argument before. What it is, and it's primarily for the bail application, there was an argument between the legal teams of whether this should be viewed as a Schedule 5 or a Schedule 6 offence. And what it means, Schedule 5 is the lesser offence, Schedule 6 is the considered more serious offence. And what it means is, as a Schedule 6 offence, there's a greater onus upon the accused to prove why he should be released on bail. You have to show exceptional circumstances. So from the forset, Gerrie Nel argued that we should see this as premeditated murder. We can argue it's premeditated murder. We should see this as Schedule 6. Whereas the defense said, no, we want to go Schedule 5. They view it as actually culpable homicide. But the magistrate said, what, we'll argue about it. We'll decide pretty much at the end. And the importance of looking at this is when it comes down to the bail application, sorry, the granting of the bail by Magistrate Desmond Nair. And he ultimately granted Oscar bail because he found that the state hadn't shown that it had a strong case. He didn't say it had a weak case, but he said it didn't have a strong case, based on these massive concessions which were made by Mr. Hilton Botha. And of course, the witnesses, let me just jump back to Hilton Botha, recalling the witness statements which he had taken. And under cross-examination, I think he first said that the neighbor which had heard the screaming was first something like 600 meters down the road. And then it dropped down to 400 meters, and then ultimately changed down to 100 meters, which again showed that he's unreliable. But what Desmond Nair did raise, the magistrate Desmond Nair, in this, were the improbabilities. And these, I think, are the important ones to note when it comes down to, when we get to the trial. And he made a whole list of them, and these are valid questions to be asking. He says it's highly improbable that a man who would walk past his own bed to fetch his firearm would not first look for the person that he seeks to protect before going to look after to find the danger. He says it's highly improbable that somebody who fears for his life, that is so terrified, would walk past the exit to the bedroom and straight into the face of danger. I mean, these were the number of the questions that he raised, that he says it's on these that need to be answered in the trial when it eventually gets there. Oscar was ultimately released on bail. He was released on a R1 million bail. Only 1,000 cash had to be put down, but he had to give 900,000 rand surety. But what the magistrate did impose were serious... That's the word. On his movement. I mean, it was quite... to be released on bail, there's generally 4 things that need to be met. You're not going to be a flight risk. You're not going to interfere with witnesses. I'm just thinking that now maybe the lawyer can help me over there. But there's 4 criteria which need to be met, and he met all of them. He's not a flight risk. He wouldn't interfere with witnesses. He would stand in trial ultimately, and that was the basis for which he was released on bail. But the magistrate imposed these huge restrictions that he had to report. I think you would have a parole officer which could drop in on any time, and he couldn't move out of Pretoria. He had to tell his parole officer wherever he was going to go, and that was the basis for I don't know if you call it, he appealed the bail application. And that was, the High Court struck down the limitations placed on him by the Magistrates Court. Huge controversy related to that. And it comes down to an understanding. And one thing I realized as well within the public sphere is I don't think the general person, and I'm not trying to insult anybody here, but doesn't understand what bail is all about. And a lot of people saying that Oscar should have gone to jail. He should never have got bail. He killed Reeva Steenkamp. Even by his own version, he killed her. He should not be released on bail. And that, the lack of understanding there is that bail is, in fact, it's a mechanism to ensure that an accused stands trial. It's not a punishment. And that caused a lot of outrage when, and there was that whole argument in the public debate as well. Typical rich white man. He's paid his way out, as usual. If it was a black guy, he'd be in jail. But he had met the criteria to be released on bail, and he hasn't fled the country yet. I mean, there was concern, everyone said he's going to bugger off overseas and all the rest of it. He's still here, and there's no indication that he's going anywhere. So we dealt with the bail application, and please, I'm trying to go through this. At the end of this, there's questions, jot them down. We'll go through them if I can try and answer them. So the impact of what this has had just up to the bail application so far. And I'd say the rise of social media and reporting in South Africa, and I suppose that's why I'm sitting here. This massive global attention on this an intriguing story. Everybody wanted this information. But it's having access to it, and you take it into a court where cameras aren't allowed. Social media substituted for the live television feed. And it was myself, a BBC journalist, Karen Morn from ENCA. She's another one who also exploded on Twitter as well. And we became the live feed from the courtroom. And it was fascinating. And it was another thing that made it so interesting was, particularly the international audience couldn't understand, was how we had all these details. We hadn't even got to trial, and we're hearing about these gunshots in the room and how the woman died. And you mentioned earlier the sub judice rule, which doesn't exist in South Africa. We don't have a jury system. It's not applicable. So what we say, we have a presiding officer in this country. We have a learned individual who would preside over the case. So what we report on couldn't affect anybody, the layman, so to speak, who would sit on a jury and ultimately judge it. But I think social media really came into this. And at Eyewitness News, I've been doing this for 3 years now, tweeting, but not quite an audience this big. And using, I don't know if you guys ever watched any of the Google Hangouts we did. You watching those? We're using Google. I mean, we don't need a live broadcast van and all those other guys. We just set up a Google Hangout and push it straight onto YouTube. And you can watch us live from outside the court. I mean, these are all the things I think is changing the way South African media operate. There's been a huge focus put on the South African judicial system. I think that's another one of the spin-offs of this case. As a regular South African, perhaps your first line of contact with the justice system might be being arrested and having to go through a bail application. And it's quite incredible how people don't understand that. When a first appearance is going to take place, the actual bail procedure, what bail is all about. And I think that has put an interesting focus on that. Another issue is gender-based violence. In these two camps I spoke about earlier, of the supporters of Oscar and then the detractors, one can't ignore that this is a gun crime and the victim is a female in an intimate situation. And it's something we've heard of, and I've heard actually people say this is not an unusual story. Take away the celebrity factor, take Oscar Pistorius out of it. It's a guy who shot dead his girlfriend. We've heard it countless times before. And it's shone the spotlight again on this kind of domestic violence. And I'm not prejudicing anything that's going to be what we're going to find out in this case, but it's this whole issue that we do have about this type of crime, and it's brought that to the fore, and I think it's something we need to consider and look at, why these type of crimes are happening. In the interim, we had the bail application that was wrapped up in February. I would like to tell you more about Reeva's parents. I mean, and you might notice that side of it has been a bit absent in what I've been saying. But, and it's a frustration, I think, from many journalists. Reeva's parents have signed exclusive deals with a particular company. I mean, that's entirely their prerogative. But they have withdrawn themselves entirely from the public spotlight. And I promise you, it's not for a lack of trying, either knocking on their door or calling up to try and get an interview with the family. Because, I mean, that's balance. That's what we've got to do as reporters. It's our responsibility. It's only fair. But they have voluntarily withdrawn from the public spotlight. It's also personal. I mean, they're dealing with it cannot be easy, losing your daughter. And my personal opinion when it comes to ethics as a journalist, if you tell me I don't want to comment, I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to bang on your door every day and you know, shove a mic in your face until you give me something. It's not how I work. So as much as I'd like to tell you more about how Reeva's parents are doing, we understand they are battling financially. Her father wasn't permanently employed. They are struggling. Their other children live overseas. but we hope that and there, of course, there's that civil matter. I mean, there was talk about there was something that might be reached between Reeva's parents and Oscar, because Reeva supported her parents. I mean, she was up in Joburg, she was making it big, she was earning some money, and she helped them out with a bit of a stipend to keep them going. With the shooting, that's no longer there. Also, what's happened in the interim, we've seen Oscar Pistorius get back on the track. Also controversial. I mean, the detractors would come out and they say, Reeva's dead, how dare he carry on living with his life, you know. But if you speak to his trainers, his coach, for example, they want to get him on the track as back as possible. I don't know if they've got some illusion about him ever be competing competitively again. I don't ever see that happening. But they want to get him back into a routine. I mean, I've spoken to his coach personally, and they're saying here's somebody who, up until the 14th of February, was 3 times a week on the track. He was in the gym every day. This was his lifestyle. This was somebody who, professional sportsman. And in a single day, that was all changed by his own actions. So they want to get him back on the track. He won't be competing anytime soon, but they want to get him back into a routine. Also, the reports of him gallivanting around town. I think it was City Press who also broke that one about him. And the Sunday Times, they had a nice big scoop about him in some night spots in Johannesburg, ladies on his arm, all disputed by his family. But in fact, he was out. He has been seen out. But after the reports, he quickly disappeared back, and he hasn't been seen often since then. We've had an international forensic investigation team in South Africa, hired by the Pistorius defense team. I understand that he has hired, there was a South African investigation team, forensic team which he hired. They made certain findings. Not satisfied with those findings, they hired the international team who came in, and they've also subsequently made certain findings which they've submitted. We don't know what the findings are, but obviously he's trying to come up with a defense, and these will all be presented ultimately when we get to the trial, but it shows the great extent where you're going to fly in a specific forensic team to come in for your defense, the great lengths that he's going to. I'm sure you've heard about the iPhone and the password. I've reported on that, and I've taken a bit of flack for that, because people say it's bullshit. But I can assure you, the South African investigators, they are in talks with Macintosh in the United States. There were 3 phones found on the scene. Actually 5, but there were 2 BlackBerries, they weren't used. There were 2 iPhone 4s and an iPhone 5. The 2 iPhone 4s, they were able to unlock and forensically analyze. Remember, if information which is, or any data which is going to be used in a criminal case, it's not just a case of going to the court and saying, well, look on the phone, you know, over there. It has to be forensically analyzed. You have to be able to show that it is sound, it hasn't been tampered with. We understand that the iPhone 5, the what do we call it? The Apple, I mean, I use the damn things, but I call it the Apple ID. Oscar's apparently forgotten. That's where we understand it, and he can't access this phone. What's critical about this phone is the police seem to understand that this is the one used with the WhatsApp devices or any other messaging on it. And the person who's going to be analyzing this phone is a chap by the name of Captain Francois Moller. He's the same captain who analyzed the phones in the Chanel Henning matter. And it was a South African first in the Chanel Henning matter. He actually took this guy's phone, and using wherever you go, modern day phones, wherever you go, it plots your GPS movements. You might not realize it, but it's all inside your device. And he actually used that on the particular days which are relevant to this particular crime, those GPS coordinates, which he plotted onto Google Earth on the particular day. And I don't know how to do it, but you know, you've got those guys who know how to use Google Earth. You can move around. It looks like a movie that you can be plotted around. He did this in live court. You know, he brought it up there, showed this is the movement. We jumped out to street view. We'd have a look around. Just to give you, the reason I'm telling you this is just to give you an idea of the caliber of the type of investigator he is. He's highly skilled, and I understand that when he says that he's sending it over to the States, that it's going to be, you know, to be analyzed, that it certainly isn't a bullshit story. I'm getting it right from the right people. We learned about it about 2 months ago, but it was confirmed on, was it last week? The additional charges, which will be added to the docket. So you've got the murder charge, You've got the possession of unlawful firearm or ammunition. Remember, that was his uncle's or his father's 38 special rounds, which he's keeping in his safe. They're charging him with that. We've got 2 additional charges which have been added to the indictment. And these relate to the negligent discharge of a firearm. And these go back, I'll deal with each one separately. The one is the Tasha's incident. This was a case of Oscar and his friends sitting at Melrose Arch, quite a upmarket, I suppose, restaurant in Pretoria, sitting around, and the guy who's deposed to the statement, he says that he has a Glock firearm. And he knew that Oscar appreciates firearms, he enjoys these weapons. And Oscar asked him at the table, please, can I have a look at your firearm? Now remember, we're sitting in a restaurant, there's a bunch of people around. And not a problem, he pulled out his firearm and he passed it to him under the table. But he says he can't remember if he told him. He wanted to tell him, but it was too late that it's one up. Now, if anybody knows firearms, that means that there's one in the chamber. So you got a bunch of guys sitting around a table with a firearm that has got one in the chamber, passing it under, and apparently Oscar was trying to clean it, or he says he doesn't know. He suspects he was trying to, and that's when this discharged. This weapon went off, a piece of shrapnel hit one of the chaps in the table in the leg, and they said they all just sat there dead quiet. And there was like a bustle, everyone was having a chat, it went dead quiet, and they kept quiet until everyone started chatting again, and they just went on with their business. So this will be raised, and I'll tell you why these are important, why you might think these are, what does this have to do with the case? I'll tell you why it's important. The other was Samantha Taylor, it's his former girlfriend. He says they were on their way from Pretoria to Johannesburg to they were going to go on a night out. And Oscar, as he always does, he has his firearm on him, busy driving, and Metro Police pulled him over. And the driver of the vehicle was out of the vehicle having a chat with the Metro Police officer. When Oscar got out to also speak to the police officer, he left his firearm on and this is in the statement by the girlfriend, he left his firearm on the chair. She says that one of the Metro Police officers saw the firearm, picked it up, cleared it, made it safe, and put it back down, which Oscar took offense to. Apparently he was upset that this man was handling his firearm. There were words exchanged. He wasn't very upset about this. They left the scene after receiving the ticket for whatever it was, and it was a couple of kilometers down the road that he, apparently in rage, in frustration, in anger, he shot out of the roof of the sunroof of this vehicle. Samantha Taylor's statement is actually quite interesting, and my colleague Mandy Wiener was reporting it on This Week. And she describes how everywhere where Oscar went, he carried his firearm. Weekends he was in the shooting range. He absolutely loved handling his weapon. But he was also very, and this goes back to his statements about fear of crime, he was very, I suppose, paranoid, if you read her statement and you accept it. She describes how they were sitting one evening at his house, the same house where this shooting took place. When they were dating, this was predates Reeva, and there was quite a hectic storm in Pretoria that night, and the wind was blowing, it was howling, and there were some noises that they heard. And she describes how Oscar went and fetched his firearm and wanted to go and inspect what the noise was. They eventually, downplayed it, that it must have been just the noise of the storm. But why these two charges are significant is when the state's going to present their case, if you've had any illusions about Oscar Pistorius as a nice guy or whatever, expect the state to destroy everything you've ever known about this man. And that's what they're going to do. I mean, that's the way they're going to build their case. They're going to paint a picture of a gung-ho, reckless gun owner, a hothead who lost his temper with his girlfriend and he shot her. And that's why you show somebody who had no disrespect for the law, firstly. I mean, if they accepted that he shot out of the roof of the car in anger. The fact that somebody would handle a firearm in a public place like that, they're going to show you is irresponsible. And it all comes down to character. This is what the state is going to try and prove. When we get to, I think we start on the 2nd, 3rd of March, we're going to trial, so it's just 3 months away. And I was reminded this morning, I had a meeting with the publisher, it's fucking 3 months. There's a lot of work to be done. we're going to have the world again descending on Pretoria. And we're going to have this fight between these two parties. And from a legal perspective, it's going to be fascinating. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be great to watch. But you're going to have the state presenting this case of Oscar Pistorius, this irresponsible gun owner who, in a fit of rage, he shot dead his girlfriend. The state's obviously going to come forward, and the argument that they're going to put forward is that it was a tragic accident. Here's somebody who was so scared of crime, all he wanted to do was to protect the woman he loved. I mean, he's an international sports star. I mean, he's a fantastic guy, and it was a terrible mistake. And even on when Magistrate Naya asked Barry Rue, what would you charge your client with? He put it to him. He says, culpable homicide. It's a mistake. It's a horrible mistake. But what it's going to come down to, and this is, and I suppose this is where I'll leave it for now. And this is where the legal argument's going to come in, and this is what it's going to hinge upon. While the state's going to push for it to be a murder, okay, and there's various other legal technical arguments that come in and on, but the point of murder is intent. That is what makes it murder, and I'm sure my legal, that is the one, it's intent. And I'll end with a quote from Prosecutor Gerrie Nel, which I think is going to sum up the argument. He says, yes, Mr. Pistorius, while you might not have intended to kill Reeva Steenkamp, you sure as hell intended to kill whoever was behind that door. And that is going to be the legal argument that this is going to be on, is that issue of intent. And there's various other intricate legal arguments that will come into that itself, but that is what the state's going to show. So that even if they can't prove that he intended to kill Reeva as that act of murder, his intent was still to kill the person behind the door. You don't fire 4 shots behind a door, they'll argue, in self-defense or as a warning shot. Cool. Hope that was helpful.
I've got time. Barry, I just want to tell you, you asked a few times, I've watched you. This was absolutely, what's the word? You were under the cosh. You were pinned against that wingback chair for 45 minutes. You don't do this as a matter of habit. You're filing 35-second sound bites to what's the word, news broadcasts on a half-hourly basis. So I just want to really congratulate you. And I think this is a very critical part of the evening. Because the questions, I mean, I feel like jumping right in front of the queue, but I can't. I'm the host for the event. But I actually just want to say to you, Barry, you've weighed up painstakingly. You've looked at all the facts. You're entitled to your own opinion. If anybody in South Africa is at liberty to pass a comment who sat through, what's the word, analyzing all the details, what is your prevailing feeling on the matter?
I'm sorry I didn't get there. I've actually got it as my last point on here, conclude guilty or not, because that's the question I always get. And I think it's too early to say. No, I'm big deal. I mean, there's no. We've got to hold. I mean, this is why we have the whole trial that'll come forward. I mean, the evidence that was presented in the bail application was inconclusive. I mean, you had Hilton Botha, who had just days and his team to put together what they had. Oscar's story is entirely plausible. It can happen. We look at Vleis Versace, former rugby hero, who shot dead his girlfriend in Nelspruit. I don't know if you recall that story.
No, his daughter.
Sorry, almost got me into trouble there. But I mean, what happened? He believed that the person that was going out of the driveway in their vehicle was somebody who was stealing the car, and he opened fire, no warning shot, and he killed his daughter. And he walked away from that. Culpable homicide, I believe, but he wasn't sentenced because they felt that was a significant punishment, or you'd suffered enough. But there's not enough information, and I suppose maybe it's a mental thing that I have to do as well as a journalist. I don't want to commit myself to anything at this stage either. I have to go into this year and listen to the evidence that's going to be presented by each side and going through this. And
I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to open the floor up to people because... okay.
So what you're saying is there's a likelihood he can walk out of there a free man with nothing sticking to him? Or
no.
Possibility?
No. At the very least, he'll walk with culpable homicide. He will...
Which can carry a jail sentence.
It can. It can. I mean, culpable homicide, you can get a suspended sentence. You could walk from that, but he will at the very least walk with a criminal record, and that would be culpable homicide. Somebody has been killed. That is not disputed.
Barry?
The defense must be costing a fortune. I mean, is the Pistorius family that flush to kind of keep going with this? I mean, or they have to keep going, but are they a very wealthy family?
Uncle Arnold. Arnold Pistorius, Uncle Arnold, as he's referred to, is a wealthy businessman. They develop malls and large property in Gauteng, Limpopo, Mpumalanga. They own several malls. I mean, they're wealthy. It's a wealthy family. Okay. They don't need any money. They're not wanting it all.
All right. And as a journalist, you obviously would have heard about these previous incidents perhaps before February 14, and his kind of antics on the athletics track. So when you that first morning when you heard the news, were you truly shocked, or did you think, well, this is possible? He could have, I can believe the story that he, before even knowing any of the details.
Trying to think back, everything came in drips and drabs. So you're trying to make up, and your mind's changing as it's coming in, and because you're getting it fresh from the sources. Again, it was an entirely plausible thing that he mistook, because all we had was mistook for a burglar. That's what we got. Oh, that's reasonable, I suppose. But no, I don't know how I was. I shocked that somebody like this, I suppose, had gotten himself into trouble.
Okay, one more. And is your how do you maintain your BlackBerry battery? Is it like Ari Gold's on Entourage, where it's just?
I use at the time then I was using 3 devices. I've got not the BlackBerry. I've got the iPhone, the iPad, and then a netbook. And I've got also a little device called a Tilt, I think it is. A nifty battery, about 4 iPhone chargers. I think it's fantastic.
Hi, this is absolutely fascinating. You did a great job of providing a good overview. But one thing struck me. How come after shooting his girlfriend, you said he only clicked between walking from the loo to his bedroom? Surely he would have heard his girlfriend scream if she didn't die for several minutes, until several minutes later. It just seems a little bit...
Well, it depends on who you ask that to as well. The state will tell you, and this is what the state's going to say, and they've brought witnesses that there was screaming before the gunshots. That's what the state's going to argue. They're going to say there was. So if you believe that, that's one side. It was also one of the improbabilities that Magistrate Desmond Nair raised when he looked at this. Saying it's highly improbable. It's not impossible, but improbable that somebody who, and if you just had to look at the layout of the bedroom, the way you'd have to walk past where the person would be lying, go down, pick up a firearm off the bed. But then also the issue about this is the person that you say you're protecting. Highly improbable that you wouldn't make sure, there's somebody in there, These are the things that he raised. So, depends on whose side, He says it was dark, couldn't see anything. He had drawn the curtains. Okay, yeah, if you're going to go that far, yeah, sure.
We've got another question here, Barry.
Sure.
Hi, Barry. How do you feel about Sky News releasing the crime scene photos?
I took a bit of flack for that as well, because I got them from the journalist as well, and I retweeted them, and we put them out, and we put it on our website. A lot of people said it was like pornography, and because there were pictures of the actual bathroom itself with the blood. There was blood spatter on the couch, which is below the staircase. So the staircase, he carried it down. There's a couch below. There was blood spatter on there. I don't have an objection to showing pictures like that. Ethically, I don't think it's a problem. It wasn't a dead body. If it was the actual dead person, I'd have reservations there. But showing a crime scene, I think it just adds to assist a news consumer understanding or putting together in their head what took place.
I mean, even though we don't have a jury, can it still have an effect on the case because that evidence has leaked out somehow?
No, it won't have any impact at all. I mean, the point of if information about a trial comes out is you've got a jury of laymen. You and I sitting there, and that is the concern that it might have an impact on how we eventually decide this. But we've got a learned man of the law. I mean, we're going to have a judge who's presided over countless cases. Experience that doesn't, and this is part of being a judge, you expect this person not to be persuaded by outside influences. They will make a decision on the case based upon the facts placed before them in the court of law, not what's being reported on the media.
Yeah, my question is, do you have any insights into the trajectory of the bullet through the door as to whether or not he was on his prosthesis or not?
Apparently, as we understand it, it confirms that he wasn't. That he was, as I understand it, is that what's come out is that he wasn't on his prosthesis. But I don't know how much that's going to change when it goes into what impact it'll have when it comes down to trial.
Will you say your name first?
Lee. Two questions. There's Hilton Botha, who faded from the scene after his testimony at the bail hearing, and he quit the police and went to work for a construction company as a security officer.
Security,
I'm wondering if you know anything about him, but also living on the property with Oscar Pistorius was his Malawian caretaker, who no one's, as far as I'm aware, seen or heard or anything from. And I'm wondering if you have any insights into his Malawian caretaker or what the heck has happened to Hilton Botha.
On the Malawian caretaker, I don't know. Maybe it's something worth scratching around and find out. On Hilton Botha, you're quite right. He's disappeared. My colleague Mandy Wiener, we've tried to get in touch with him. We want to chat to him as well, and he's totally pulled out. He did do a couple of interviews afterwards. Once he left the police and that day, he said some interesting things, I suppose, about his thoughts on the case. But he was quickly, according to him, he was served with papers to keep quiet, stop talking. The police investigating team weren't happy with him. Now he's left the police talking about the case. They weren't happy about that either. But just a quick one on Hilton Botha, and he has taken a lot of flack, and I think perhaps unfairly to some degree. I think the biggest strategy of what took place that week from the prosecution side, I mean, it would be absurd to think that going in days after this shooting that you'd have a solid, tight case. It's impossible. I mean, you just don't have that much time to secure all the forensic data you need, all the tests and everything. It is basically on what you can view and just the very bare statements you can take. What the prosecution team got out of this here, that is the gold, I suppose, is that they got Oscar Pistorius to commit to a version. That's what he did. He put down on paper, this is what happened. He had to give something compelling for him to be released on bail. It doesn't matter that Hilton Botha cocked up whatever he said. We'll still get to trial and we'll be tested there. I mean, they'll probably try and resurrect what Hilton said there. But the big point is that they've got Oscar Pistorius. He's committed to that. If he has to start changing that version, well, that is certainly to the detriment of him, and he probably won't.
Barry, I'd like to pick up this aspect of gender-based violence, and particularly something that you just said, possibly a slip of your tongue, when you talked about there being a learned man who will preside over this.
Apparently it is a woman, by the way.
Well, I was actually going to ask that, because it does seem to me that we live in a country in which, of course, rates of violence against women are extraordinarily high. And are we going to? What struck me with the visual images of the bail hearing was that it very much looked like a trial by a man who'd murdered a woman, with only other men present. Really, the only other woman in the courtroom was Amy. So, are we looking at yet another incident of sort of man murders woman then off scene? Then men discuss justice with other men.
We haven't officially had a judge appointed yet. I mean, this has been transferred to the North Gauteng High Court for trial. We don't know who the judge is. I understand, and we've got it quite reliably, it is a female judge, and she'll be coming in from Johannesburg. Because they've now amalgamated North and South Gauteng into one. So I'm not familiar with this particular judge, because I'm in Pretoria, but we understand she's from the South Gauteng. But you look at the prosecution team. You got Karinel and Andrea Johnson. And I get on very well with this team, and she's fantastic. I mean, particularly in the Chanel Hennon case. I mean, they're a fantastic team. Like I said, they go back to the Scorpions days of putting Salibi behind. So, really good.
Barry, just a quick one, Derek here. Are you confident that, given the Fred van der Vyver, the Shindua Diwali case, that our prosecution have got enough resources to go against what looks like in this country people who have enough money can buy a result in a case, put enough evidence out there to blur the prosecution's case far enough to give them a bit of doubt? That's the first thing. And the second thing is just your objective opinion on why she would lock the door of her bathroom with her boyfriend at 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever time it was.
On do we have the resources or the commitment, I suppose? One thing that's become clear, and this happened soon after Hilton Botha's collapse, because the media grabbed Hilton Botha and they mauled him. I mean, and not just South African media. The world spotlight was placed on our justice system. And examples like Dewani were raised. You know, is this just another case? And all these other mistakes that were raised. So what Ria Pierga immediately, she came out and Hilton Botha was pulled from it. They said that it had nothing to do with what happened in court. We just want to put whatever the reasons, they put a high-profile team on it. They've got that. Your prosecution team, like I think Kardinal speaks for himself. And if you had to look at, he was recognized, and it was it earlier this year or late last year? He was recognized by the International Association of Prosecutors, I think it is, for his work against Salibi. So there's international recognition. And if there's ever a case where you face an adversity to the fact that he got arrested, if you recall that, I mean, this is huge that they had to push through to get this man prosecuted, and they managed to do it. So I think the resolve from the prosecution team is there's no hassle there. But you're going to have a lot of battle and a lot of resistance from the defense. But that's why I think it's going to be a fantastic legal battle. It's going to be good. Why would Reeva lock that's one of the improbabilities. You're in your own house, you feel safe, it's your boyfriend, you go to the bathroom. Why would you lock it? I don't know. I can't. I wouldn't lock it. I'll leave it open.
You got a loud voice. Two more, yours and then one.
One of the things that I've heard, I'm sure you've heard a lot of theories on this case, is that it was drugs related. Hilton Botha is now employed by one of the companies belonging to Oscar Pistorius' uncle, and Reeva was murdered by Oscar. Have you come across anything?
Drugs related? Not, yes. You know, this was put quite early, not quite drugs, but the whole issue of steroids as well, and it was discussed publicly, I think. Here's an international sportsman, and this is why they say that it's highly unlikely. International sportsman who can't go and do anything without having his urine tested, whether it's entering a competition or doing they're monitoring for all sorts of substances. So the likelihood that he was doing drugs or anything it's quite remote. I haven't heard that, and it's not, through my contacts, there's no hint that there was any drugs related to this, whether abuse or dealing. It's not something that I've heard.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody? Dennis, I know you've got a loud voice. Come on.
I'm wondering about the psyche of the Pistorius family. Are they holding together on this? Do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, I've had meetings with Arnold and his nephews, and from a family perspective, I think they're a very closely knit family. Traditional Afrikaans, they've got very close values, and a very religion dominated. They're a strong Christian background. So from all of that, they are holding together. I mean, you just got to look at Carl, for example. He's often tweeting things about his brother, and there has been that support from the very beginning. So I think they are holding up. It's.
You don't sense any cracks?
Any?
Cracks.
No, I mean, remember, there is that division with Henke, his father. He's pretty much been marginalized, but that wasn't existing long before this. I don't see anything at the moment. They have rallied behind Oscar ahead of this trial.
Okay, I'm getting a bit of pressure from the Labia that the 8:30 movie needs to take place. Guys, I know everyone's going to file here very quickly. Just thank you very much for your support. I don't have a sponsor. I deal with every single one of you individually via email, and I love it. And I look forward to communicating new events with you in the new year. And I'll have, Barry will come back. Wait till March happens and the trial starts. this guy we'll lead him in on an armored Maybach down Upper Orange to this event place. So thanks very much, and give him a big round of applause.
Thank you.